At my daughter's engagement party, they hid me behind a curtain like hired help. I paid for everything, the flowers, the food, even her dress. Then I heard her future mother-in-law brag about the luxury honeymoon I had funded, mocking me as if I couldn't tell a resort from a motel. I stayed calm. That night, I canceled it all. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The Westfield Country Club ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, their light scattering across white roses arranged in towering glass vases. Champagne flowed freely, servers gliding through the room with silver trays as if orchestrated by some unseen conductor. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and music swelled with polished elegance. From the shadows behind a velvet curtain, near the kitchen's swinging doors, I stood unseen. A waiter brushed past me carrying canapes, glancing only briefly in my direction. He thought I was one of them, staff in borrowed black. I smoothed the folds of my navy dress, the one I had worked 2 months of overtime to buy, and adjusted the strand of pearls resting against my collarbone. Each pearl was real, purchased one at a time over decades of teaching elementary school. My single indulgence, my badge of sacrifice. At 58, I believed I had already known heartbreak, but that night, as I pressed myself into the shadows and watched my daughter, my only child, radiate in a designer gown, hand-linked with her fiancé, I realized I had been naive. Claire's laughter rose above the crowd, bright and eager, while Ethan leaned close, smiling with the confidence of a man born into privilege. His mother, Margaret Collins, glided from guest to guest with effortless authority, her voice a low command wrapped in silk. To the untrained eye, she was the gracious hostess. In truth, every guest, every photograph, every flower arrangement had been bought by me. The venue, the catering, the flowers, even the dress Claire wore that night, all of it carved out of my modest teacher's pension and savings. Yet as Margaret accepted compliments with polished modesty, as though generosity spilled from her own pockets, I remained hidden, invisible in a room I had paid to illuminate. "Mom, there you are." Claire's voice startled me. She had slipped behind the curtain, eyes darting nervously over her shoulder. "I've been here the whole time," I answered, forcing a smile. Right where Margaret suggested I wait. Her expression tightened. "It's just, Ethan's family has a certain way of doing things. Margaret thought it would be better if you remained discreet." The words slipped from my lips before I could stop them. "Invisible, you mean?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, her manicured hand fluttering as if to brush away my feelings. "Margaret's family knows everyone who matters in Chicago. These connections are crucial for Ethan's career, for our future." "What about my connections?" I wanted to ask. What about the hundreds of families I had guided, the children whose futures I had shaped? What about my worth? But Claire had already turned back toward the crowd. "Stay here, okay? We'll talk later." She disappeared into the ballroom, transformed into a stranger, laughing too loudly, twirling her hair too often, her eyes constantly searching Margaret's approval. I stood rooted in the shadows as Margaret introduced my daughter to influential guests, presenting her as practically the daughter she never had. Claire called her mom twice, as though the word had suddenly shifted allegiance. The cake was cut, champagne flowed, photographs captured moments I was excluded from. Only once did someone notice me, a young waiter offering me a glass. His kindness startled me. "Would you like one, ma'am?" "Thank you." I took the glass, my hand trembling. "I'm Evelyn, Claire's mother." His eyes widened. I'm sorry, I thought you worked here." "Don't worry." I forced a smile and sipped, watching Margaret pose with the happy couple, the cameras clicking around them. That was the story everyone was meant to believe, that she was the benefactor, that I was absent. Later, when I slipped from the ballroom, I paused at the coat room door. Margaret's voice floated through the air, lilting with amusement as she spoke to another guest. "Of course we're arranging the most exquisite honeymoon for them in the Maldives. 3 weeks of absolute luxury." "That's wonderful of you, Margaret," the guest gushed. Her laughter chimed like glass shattering. "Well, technically, Evelyn is paying for it, teacher's pension or whatever. But I've ensured they'll have the best villa on the water. The poor woman wouldn't know a luxury resort from a roadside motel." The words struck like shards of ice. My chest constricted. I set down my glass, left without goodbyes, and walked to my car in silence. Inside the dim interior, I unlocked my phone with shaking hands. The honeymoon package, $24,500 carefully saved over 15 years, still carried the option of full refund within 30 days. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering. For 3 decades, I had taught children about kindness, respect, and fairness. I had never thought of myself as vengeful, but this wasn't vengeance. This was survival. I pressed cancel reservation. Confirmed. Yes, I want a full refund. A single vibration signaled the confirmation email. Your cancellation has been processed successfully. The dam broke inside me, not tears, not rage, but a cold clarity. I had spent my life raising a daughter who, in the end, chose to be ashamed of me, who let me pay for everything while hiding me away, who preferred Margaret's glittering connections to my decades of sacrifice. I drove home through the quiet streets, headlights reflecting off the familiar small house where I had raised Claire alone after Robert left. The house of late nights grading papers, of scraped together dollars for dance lessons and tuition, of birthdays and bedtime stories. That night, for the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to spend money on myself, to become visible again. The morning after the engagement party, I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The silence pressed in on me, thick with memory. The refund from the canceled honeymoon sat safely back in my account, the sum glowing on my phone screen like a beacon. 15 years of restraint, tutoring sessions, summer classes, late nights grading, papers, and all of it had nearly disappeared into an ocean resort meant to impress people who would never value me. Claire was 8 the night Robert walked out. I still remember her small figure framed in the doorway of her bedroom, clutching the stuffed rabbit she refused to sleep without. "When is Daddy coming home?" she asked, her voice so fragile I nearly shattered hearing it. I had knelt, pulling her trembling body into my arm, the scent of strawberry shampoo clinging to her hair. "He has a new family now," I whispered, the words bitter and heavy. "But you and I, Claire, we're still a family. You and me against the world." And so it was, bills stacked like bricks. Our comfortable upper-middle-class life evaporated almost overnight. While Robert slipped seamlessly into his shiny new existence with a woman from his office and her children, I pieced together what I could from my modest teacher's salary. I refused to let my daughter's life collapse. I refused to let her feel less than. Weekends became tutoring sessions at the library for struggling students. Summers were spent teaching remedial classes instead of resting. Nights belonged to stacks of papers and lesson plans while Claire slept. My mother visited often, shaking her head at my exhaustion. "Evelyn, you are working yourself into the ground," she warned. "Let her go to public school. There's no shame in it." But there was shame, in my mind at least, in allowing Robert's abandonment to steal even more from Claire. She had already lost her father. She would not lose her opportunities too. I kept her in private school. I kept her in ballet, piano, tennis. I found money for the class trips to Washington, D.C. and New York, even when it meant skipping meals or patching the same pair of shoes for another season. On her 16th birthday, I handed her the keys to a used BMW I had scraped every dollar to buy. Nothing flashy, but safe, reliable, a symbol that she would not stand apart from her wealthier friends. Her smile had been radiant, her friends crowding around, squealing with admiration. I had stood back, silent, calculating how many more tutoring hours I would need to pay off the loan. The real shift began when Claire left for Northwestern University. Every penny of savings I had amassed went into her tuition and housing, leaving my retirement fund dangerously thin. Yet pride swelled in me, fierce and bright. My daughter was stepping into a future I had bled to secure. It was there during her sophomore year that she met Ethan Collins in a business ethics class. He was handsome, polished, son of a prominent surgeon and a socialite mother. He carried himself with the assurance of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. I saw the spark in Claire's eyes the first time she brought him home, though I also saw the flicker of embarrassment when his gaze lingered on our modest kitchen with its IKEA cabinets and outdated linoleum floor. It's cozy, he said politely, a smile not quite reaching his eyes. Later, Claire suggested we consider renovations. Mom, this place is so dated. She laughed lightly, but I felt the shift in her voice, the new self-consciousness that had never been there before. Suddenly, the home that had been sanctuary was not enough. Suddenly, neither was I. After graduation, she secured a marketing job at a firm where Margaret Collins knew someone. Claire moved into a sleek downtown apartment with rent that far outstripped her salary. I suspected Ethan's parents were footing part of the bill, though Claire insisted she was managing. Her visits home grew pretty infrequent, and when she did appear, she came armed with subtle critiques. My clothes were too plain, my hairstyle too simple, my life too small. Mom, you should see a real stylist, she would say, smiling but sharp. And haven't you thought about moving somewhere more vibrant? What she didn't understand was that I had given up vibrant long ago, traded it for stability, for her. The first time I met Margaret Collins was at a dinner in their Lake Forest mansion. She appraised me with the detached interest of someone examining an object at auction. How quaint that you've dedicated your life to teaching, she said, her tone laced with condescension. Such a noble profession. Though I imagine the salary doesn't allow for much excitement. Claire jumped to defend me. Mom loves teaching. She's good at it. Some of her students have gone on to great schools. It should have warmed me, but instead the apology in her tone cut deeper than Margaret's words. My daughter was already beginning to excuse me, to present me as something less than acceptable in this glittering new world. Months later, Ethan proposed with a diamond ring that could have paid for a year of my mortgage. Claire's voice rang with joy when she called. Mom, you won't believe it. The ring is gorgeous, and Margaret already knows the perfect venue. She has connections everywhere. You don't need to worry about anything. But I did worry. I wanted to contribute, to honor the tradition of the bride's family. Claire laughed, brushing me aside. This isn't exactly a traditional situation, Mom. Margaret knows everyone. You can help in other ways. Other ways became checks written for venues I would never enter, for flowers I would never choose, for dresses I would never see until they arrived hanging in her closet. My money paid for everything, yet Margaret's name crowned every detail. And now, with my coffee growing colder by the minute, I realized the truth I had long denied. I had sacrificed my entire life to give Claire wings, never realizing she would use them to fly into a world where I was no longer welcome. The phone rang 3 days after the engagement party, its sharp tones slicing through the quiet of my small house. I let it go to voicemail once, then twice. On the third call, I forced myself to answer. Mom, what did you do? Claire's voice came through tight and accusatory. Hello to you too, I said, my voice steady though my pulse spiked. Margaret just told me the honeymoon was canceled. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. I moved to the window, watching neighborhood children chase each other in the late afternoon light. Their laughter carried a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. It's not a mistake, I said quietly. I canceled it. The silence stretched, heavy and brittle. When Claire spoke again, her words trembled between shock and rage. You did what? Why would you do that? Is this some kind of joke? No joke, I replied, surprised by my own calm. I've reconsidered my contribution. Reconsidered? Her voice rose to a near shout. That isn't your decision to make. Margaret has already told everyone about the Maldives. Ethan and I have taken time off work. This is beyond embarrassing. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her words press against me like stones. Claire, I was hidden behind a curtain at your engagement party, a party I paid for entirely. What are you talking about? She snapped, though there was hesitation in her tone. I stood with the staff all night. Your future mother-in-law took credit for everything. You called her mom twice. Oh my God, she groaned, exasperation bleeding through. This is about that? You're being petty over some seating arrangement? Margaret was just trying to make things perfect. You don't understand how these circles work. She was helping. I laughed once, sharp and without humor. Helping who exactly? I heard her, Claire. I heard her tell people she arranged your honeymoon, the one I paid for, $24,500. My savings. So this is about the money, her tone dripped with disdain. You always said you wanted to contribute. Isn't this what you saved for? Contributing is one thing, I said firmly. Being exploited while treated like an embarrassment is another. The line went quiet, muffled voices in the background. Then Claire returned, her tone forcibly calm. I'm coming over. We need to discuss this in person. Ethan and Margaret are coming too. That's not necessary. This is between you and me. It affects all of us now. We'll be there in an hour. The line went dead. I spent that hour in strange preparation. Coffee brewed, cookies arranged on a plate, lipstick reapplied. It felt like dressing for a trial or perhaps an execution. They arrived exactly on time, a united front at my door. Claire entered first, eyes downcast. Ethan followed, his handsome face set in careful diplomacy. Margaret swept in last, perfume saturating my modest living room. Evelyn, Margaret began, seating herself as though my couch belonged to her. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said, standing tall. I've decided not to fund the honeymoon. Ethan cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, we're grateful for everything you've done, but backing out now creates difficulties. Mom, please, Claire added, her voice softer now, coaxing. Everyone knows about the trip. Margaret's friend owns the resort. We'll look ridiculous if we cancel. I already canceled it. Margaret's perfectly arched brows lifted. Surely this isn't about being placed discreetly at the party. Claire mentioned you were feeling slighted, but that was for your benefit. You would have been uncomfortable. My breath caught at the audacity. For my benefit? But, I repeated slowly, it being hidden away from my daughter's engagement was for my benefit. Mom, Claire interjected quickly, you know how you get in social situations? You always bring up your students or school problems. Margaret wanted everything polished, seamless. She was just looking out for you. I turned to my daughter, really seeing her for the first time. The same eyes that once sparkled with pride when she introduced me to her teachers now avoided mine. And was it also for my benefit that Margaret took credit for the party I financed? That she's telling people she arranged a honeymoon my savings paid for? Margaret waved her hand, bored. Details, Evelyn. What matters is creating the right impression. Surely you want what's best for Claire. What I want, I said, my voice rising with new strength, is for my daughter not to be ashamed of me. No one is ashamed, Claire said quickly. Really? My words cut through the air. Then why was I hidden? Why wasn't I introduced to Ethan's family? Why did you let Margaret act as if she were hosting with her own money? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hayes, you're making this into more than it is. My mother was simply managing the social aspects. I turned to him. Ethan, I've spent my life teaching children to treat others with dignity and respect. What happened that night was neither dignified nor respectful. Margaret stood abruptly, her patience thinning. This is precisely why we handled things. You don't understand our world. What's at stake for these children? Your world, I interrupted, is one where value is measured in bank accounts and names on guest lists. That's not my world, and it never will be. Mom, stop. Claire's voice cracked, trembling with frustration. You're embarrassing me. The words hung between us like a verdict. That's it, isn't it? I whispered. I embarrass you. Your teacher mother, with her sensible shoes and her small mortgage, embarrasses you. That's not what I meant, Claire said quickly, but her eyes betrayed her. I drew a steady breath. The honeymoon cancellation stands. I won't contribute another cent. You can't do this, Claire cried. We've already planned everything based on your promise. Actually, I can, I said firmly. Margaret straightened her designer jacket. Then we'll leave. Come, Claire. Come, Ethan. We'll handle this ourselves. For a moment, Claire hesitated, waiting for me to bend as I always had. When I didn't, her voice dropped to a whisper. I never thought you could be so selfish. The door shut behind them, leaving silence in their wake. But this silence felt different. Less like loneliness, more like clarity. For the first time, I had set a boundary, and I had not broken. And this is only the beginning. If you're still here, stay with me. Like, share, and subscribe. Because what comes next will change everything. The silence that lingered after Claire, Ethan, and Margaret left my house was unlike any I had ever known. For years, silence had been an unwelcome guest. Reminders of Robert's absence, of Claire's long hours away at school, of a home too empty for the weight it carried. But now, silence felt almost clean, stripped of apologies, stripped of obligations. It was not loneliness, it was clarity. I wandered through the rooms of my house as if seeing them for the first time. The worn sofa where I had read bedtime stories to Claire, the dining table scarred with science projects and glitter glue, the walls lined with framed photographs. All of them bore the marks of a life dedicated to others. Yet there was not a single corner that reflected me alone. No trace of what I loved. No image of who I might have been if sacrifice had not consumed me. That night, I sat with my laptop open, the glow of the screen bright against the quiet dark. The refund from the honeymoon blinked on my banking app. $24,500, whole again. My finger hovered over the transfer to savings button, muscle memory aching to tuck it away, to prepare for the next storm. But another thought pierced through. What if, just once, I spent money on myself, not on Claire, not on bills, not on the endless stream of needs that never left space for mine? I typed into the search bar. Pottery classes near me. Before Claire, before Robert, before responsibilities tightened like a rope around my chest, I had loved clay. I remembered the texture of earth in my palms, the hypnotic spin of the wheel, the way form emerged from formlessness. Life had pulled me away from it, convincing me I had no right to such indulgences. Yet here it was, waiting, an old part of myself calling me home. The local arts center offered an 8-week beginner's course, $350. My hand shook as I clicked register and entered my card information. The confirmation email arrived, ordinary and miraculous. After that first step, something inside me shifted, like a locked door giving way. I booked a consultation with an interior designer, a thought that once would have embarrassed me. I made an appointment at a salon specializing in women over 50, where they promised not to hide my silver-streaked hair, but to celebrate it. The next morning, I called Diane Foster, an old friend who had retired the year before. "Evelyn, is everything all right?" Her voice carried surprise. "Not yet," I admitted, "but I think it might be soon. I was wondering if your offer to join you in Maine is still open." Months earlier, Diane had invited me to a writing retreat on the coast, a 10-day workshop followed by a week of exploration. I had declined without hesitation. Too expensive, too selfish, too much to do for Claire's wedding. But now the thought of it felt like oxygen. "Of course it's still open," Diane said warmly. "The cabin has 2 bedrooms. I'd love the company. But what about the wedding? I thought you were buried in preparations." I told her the truth, every painful detail. My words trembled at first, but with each sentence, my voice steadied, as if by speaking it aloud, I was loosening chains I had worn for decades. Diane listened without interruption, her quiet breaths on the other end anchoring me. "Oh, Evelyn," she sighed when I finished, "you've given that girl everything. Maybe it's time she sees you as a person, not just a mother." That afternoon, I booked a flight to Maine. The text from Claire began almost immediately, followed by calls from Ethan and Margaret. "Mom, you've never let me down before. Please don't start now. This wedding means everything. Think about what you're doing. You're being selfish. Do you want to cause permanent damage?" Each message lit up my phone. Each call pierced the quiet. I read them all, but I answered none. For once, I chose silence over explanation. Instead, I painted my living room walls a soft sage green, replacing the tired beige that had dulled my evenings for years. I donated bags of clothes I had kept out of practicality rather than joy. I ordered a new sofa, one that invited rest instead of simply enduring weight. Piece by piece, room by room, my house began to breathe again. One evening, as I applied a second coat of paint, I whispered into the empty room, "This is mine." My voice echoed softly as if the house itself was relieved to finally hear me claim it. At night, when guilt clawed at me, I reminded myself I was not abandoning Claire. I was reclaiming Evelyn. I was rediscovering the woman who had been buried under sacrifice and silence. And so, in the quiet after confrontation, I took my first true steps toward a life that belonged not just to a mother or a teacher, but to me. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon, sharp against the fresh coat of paint I had just finished in the hallway. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but the sound persisted, urgent and unrelenting, until I finally opened the door. Claire stood there, her cheeks flushed, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me into the house, her heels clicking against the new hardwood floor I had chosen for myself. "What is going on?" she demanded, spinning to face me. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Why are you ignoring us?" I closed the door gently, unwilling to let her storm unsettle the space I had only just begun to claim as mine. "Because I needed quiet," I said simply. Her gaze swept across the room, confusion etched into her face. The sage green walls, the comfortable sectional sofa, the artwork where old photographs had once crowded the walls. "What happened in here? Where are the pictures?" "I'm redecorating, I answered. Her eyes widened. "Now, with the wedding coming? Mom, we need to talk about the honeymoon money." I gestured for her to sit, though she didn't move. "There's nothing to discuss. I canceled it. The money has been reallocated." "Reallocated?" Her voice cracked, disbelief flashing into anger. "You mean this?" She pointed to the new furniture, the fresh paint, the changes she couldn't comprehend. "You're spending our honeymoon money on this?" "No," I corrected gently. "I'm spending my money on my life. That money came from years of tutoring, from summers I should have rested, from nights I spent grading until dawn. I put you first for decades, Claire, and now I'm choosing something different." Her face flushed crimson. "So this is punishment? For the engagement party? I told you I was sorry. Margaret was just trying to—" "This isn't about Margaret," I cut in. "It isn't even about the party. It's about me finally recognizing my own worth." She stared at me as if I had spoken a foreign language. "So you're abandoning me? 4 months before my wedding? Do you have any idea what people are saying? Do you know what Margaret is saying about you?" A pang of guilt shot through me, sharp and familiar. Guilt had been my constant companion since the day Robert left, shaping every choice I made. But beneath the guilt was something stronger now, resolve. "I'm not abandoning you, Claire. I'll be at your wedding. I'll wear a beautiful dress, smile for the photographs, and I'll be proud of you. But I will not be treated like an ATM or an embarrassment. I won't be hidden anymore." Her lips trembled. "You don't even sound like yourself." "Maybe that's because I'm just getting to know her myself," I whispered. She blinked, stunned, as if she hadn't expected defiance from me. Her voice dropped, almost pleading. "So what now? What happens to the wedding?" "To us. You and Ethan and Margaret will plan the wedding you can afford without my money," I said. "And I'm going to Maine next week with Diane. 17 days at a writer's retreat." Her mouth fell open. "Maine, you can't just leave. We have tastings to finalize, flowers to pick, fittings to schedule. Mom, this is your job too." "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "it isn't. Not anymore." The words settled between us like stones in water, rippling through every memory we shared. "You're really not going to help at all?" she whispered. I sat beside her, taking her hand. Her skin was soft, uncalloused, untouched by the weight of labor mine had always known. "I'll be there as your mother there, that's all. That's enough." She pulled her hand away as though burned. "I don't even know who you are anymore." I looked at her, at the child I had raised with every ounce of strength I possessed, at the woman she had become under Margaret's careful tutelage, and for the first time, I didn't bend beneath her disappointment. "I'm just beginning to find out," I said quietly. Claire rose, her shoulders stiff. Without another word, she walked to the door. The slam echoed through the house, rattling the frames of windows I had cleaned just the day before. The silence that followed was heavy but not unbearable. I stood in the center of my living room, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Her words still echoed. "I don't even know who you are anymore." And perhaps she didn't. Perhaps I didn't fully either. But I was finally willing to learn. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled across the neighborhood, turning the leaves golden. I thought of the years I had spent in shadows, behind curtains, behind excuses, behind endless sacrifice. That time was over. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for the next demand. I wasn't preparing for the next request. I was standing still, firmly in my own life. This was the breaking point, and I had chosen myself. And if you've followed me this far, don't look away now. Like, share, and subscribe because the path ahead is only getting harder and brighter. The morning of Claire's wedding dawned bright and clear, though I didn't see it through stained glass windows or polished chandeliers. I wasn't at the Westfield Country Club, watching her glide down the aisle. Instead, I stood in a modest gallery at the community center, arranging the pottery pieces I had shaped over the past 3 months. My hands trembled, not from regret, but from anticipation. For once, they weren't holding bills, report cards, or endless checkbooks. They held beauty of my own making. Bowls glazed in shades of ocean blue, mugs carved with delicate ridges, a vase the color of late autumn leaves, all stood before me, lined up on white linen. It was my first exhibition, my first act of claiming a space in the world as Evelyn, not just as someone's mother or someone's teacher. "These are exceptional for a beginner," Thomas Reed, my pottery instructor, said as he adjusted the lighting on a small bowl with swirls of turquoise and green. I smiled, allowing myself the luxury of pride. "Thank you, it feels good to create something that's just mine." The gallery doors opened, and people began to filter in, neighbors, colleagues from the school, fellow students from class. Their voices hummed with warmth as they paused to admire my work. No one here cared about country clubs or who knew the owner. They cared about the way a cup curved in their hands, the texture of clay beneath their fingers, the story of a woman who had found herself again in the turning of a wheel. Still, as the crowd grew, thoughts of Claire pressed against me. Was she standing at the altar now, glancing at the empty seat I should have filled? Was Margaret spinning her version of my absence, weaving lies about indifference or distraction? I didn't have to wonder long. Midway through the exhibition, my phone buzzed with a message. I slipped it from my purse and my heart jolted. "It's Ethan. Thought you should know. Claire looked for you before walking down the aisle. Margaret told her you were too busy with your little pottery hobby to attend. If that's not true, you might want to set the record straight." My breath caught and my hands trembled. Typical Margaret. She had twisted my absence into negligence, stripping it of the boundary I had fought so hard to draw. For a moment, I nearly called Claire, nearly let my voice tremble apologies into her ear. But then I remembered the curtain, the way she had hidden me, the way she had said, "You're embarrassing me." This was her wedding day. Whatever truth needed telling could wait. I typed a response to Ethan. "Thank you for letting me know. Please tell Claire I wish her happiness." Then I slipped the phone back into my purse. The day moved forward. People admired the pieces, purchased them, pressed cash into my hands with genuine appreciation. By late afternoon, I had sold 6 works, including my favorite bowl, the one whose glaze reminded me of the ocean in Maine. The woman who bought it held it reverently, her eyes shining. "This speaks to me," she said softly. "There's honesty in it." Her words warmed me in a way applause never had. Pride unfurled inside me, not tied to my daughter's accomplishments, not shackled to sacrifice, but wholly my own. As the gallery quieted, Linda Graham, my closest colleague, appeared at my side. She held a teacup I had made, pale green with delicate lines. "I saw the announcement in the paper this morning," she said gently. "Smaller venue than originally planned. No mention of the Maldives." I nodded, unsurprised. Without my savings, the wedding had been trimmed down, its edges sharper, its shine less blinding. They had to scale back after I withdrew my funding. "Do you regret it?" she asked. The question lingered. I thought of Claire's laughter when she was small, her devotion to ballet, the long nights I had stayed awake to give her everything. I thought of the sting of being hidden away, of Margaret's mocking words, of Claire's dismissal. "I regret that it came to this," I admitted. "I regret that my daughter values appearances more than authenticity. But no, I don't regret valuing myself." Linda squeezed my hand. "Then you've gained more than you've lost. And these," she lifted the teacup, smiling, "these are beautiful, Evelyn. You've always been an incredible teacher. But maybe you've been hiding an artist all these years." As the sun slipped lower, shadows stretched across the gallery floor. I stood among my pieces, among proof of what I could create, and felt both sadness and liberation. Somewhere across the city, Claire was dancing in her white gown, her ring catching the light, her life tethered to Ethan's and Margaret's world. She might glance at the empty seat where her mother should have been. She might wonder. She might not. But I, Evelyn Hayes, was standing tall, my car trunk filled with pottery that mattered not because it paid for someone else's dreams, but because it was born of my own hands, my own heart. The wedding had gone on without me, and I had gone on without it. Nearly a year had passed since the day Claire married Ethan without me in attendance. 12 months of silence stretched between us, marked only by Margaret's occasional barbed messages and the quiet ache of absence. Yet in that silence, something else had taken root. I had built a studio in my garage, shelves lined with vases, bowls, and mugs that bore the imprint of my hands. I had traveled to Maine with Diane, stood at the edge of the Atlantic while gulls wheeled overhead, and watched the sunrise at the Grand Canyon alone, wrapped in solitude that felt more like strength than emptiness. One Wednesday in late May, the doorbell rang. My arms were elbow-deep in clay, shaping a wide bowl meant for a restaurant downtown. I nearly ignored it, but some instinct pulled me to the door. Claire stood on my porch. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, her posture stripped of the brittle poise Margaret had once cultivated in her. She looked smaller somehow and more human. "Mom," she said softly. "Claire." We stood staring at each other, time compressing into a single fragile moment. Every maternal instinct in me screamed to close the distance, to gather her in my arms, but I held myself still. "This is a surprise," I managed. "I should have called first. You're working." She gestured toward the clay, still drying on my hands. "I am, but I can take a break. Would you like to come in?" She nodded, stepping into a house that looked different than the one she had stormed out of months before. Her eyes swept over the sage-green walls, the clean lines of new furniture, the artwork and pottery that spoke of a woman she barely knew. "Your home looks beautiful," she said quietly. "Different, but beautiful." "Thank you. It feels more like me now." Silence stretched again. We both fumbled with words neither of us knew how to begin. Finally, I busied myself with the kettle, washing the clay from my fingers. "Would you like some tea?" "Please." We sat at the kitchen table, steam rising between us. Claire cupped her mug in both hands as if drawing strength from its warmth. Then she exhaled, the words spilling out. "I'm pregnant." For a heartbeat, my world shifted. Joy surged first. Joy at the thought of a grandchild. Joy at new life. But it was tangled with sadness for the months we had lost and concern at the weariness etched into her face. "Congratulations," I said carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Sick, mostly," she admitted with a wry smile. Then her expression grew serious. "But that's not why I'm here. I came because I want my child to know their grandmother. And because I owe you an apology." My breath caught. Claire had never been one to apologize. "You were right," she said, her voice trembling. "About Margaret, about how I treated you, about everything." "What happened?" I asked softly. Her gaze lifted, meeting mine directly. "After the wedding, it got worse. Margaret had opinions about everything, where we lived, how we decorated, which doctors I should see. At first, Ethan sided with her, but even he started to suffocate. And when we told her about the baby, she immediately claimed it as hers. The nursery, the shower, even which preschool we'd choose. When I disagreed, she told me she would make sure the baby was raised properly, unlike me." Pain flared in my chest. "I'm sorry she said that." "Don't be," Claire said firmly, because it made me see clearly. I realized I'd been chasing her approval, twisting myself into someone I'm not, while pushing away the one person who always loved me without condition. "I was ashamed of you, Mom. Ashamed of this house, of your life. I thought Margaret's world was what I wanted, but living in it has been the loneliest year of my life." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I want you to know I see it now. I see you, and I'm so sorry." I looked at her, really looked. Beneath the designer blouse and trembling hands was the little girl who once pressed glittery cards into my palm on Mother's Day, the child who crawled into my lap during storms. "I won't pretend it didn't hurt," I said slowly. "It did, but I'm not interested in holding on to resentment, especially not with a grandchild on the way." Her face brightened through tears. "So you'll be part of the baby's life?" I'd like to be, but things have to be different. I won't go back to being hidden or treated like an embarrassment. I understand, she said quickly. Ethan understands too. He's finally standing up to Margaret. It's been ugly, but he's doing it. I raised an eyebrow. And how has Margaret taken that? Claire laughed, a small, genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. Not well, but we're learning to set boundaries. For once, boundaries are good, I said, and they've saved me. Her gaze traveled around the kitchen, pausing on the shelves lined with my pottery, the calendar filled with gallery dates, the photographs of Maine and the Grand Canyon. You've changed, she whispered. I've become more myself, I corrected. There's a difference. We talked for an hour, really talked. She told me about her work, about Ethan's struggles to break free of Margaret's grip. I showed her the studio, explained how commissions had begun to trickle in. When she rose to leave, she hesitated at the door. Can I come back next week? Maybe you could show me how to make something. I always loved watching you with clay. I'd like that, I said. This time, when she moved to hug me, I opened my arms. And if you're still listening, don't leave now. Like, share, and subscribe. Because what comes next isn't just about endings, but about the fragile hope of beginnings. The weeks that followed, Claire's first visit unfolded like cautious steps across a frozen lake. Tentative, careful, each one testing whether the ice would hold. She came back the following Saturday, then the next. At first, our conversations stayed on safe ground, her morning sickness, work deadlines, the nursery she and Ethan were setting up in their apartment. But slowly, like clay softening underwater, we began to press into deeper places. One afternoon, I led her into my studio. The garage had transformed into a sanctuary, shelves lined with bowls and vases, the pottery wheel stationed near the window where sunlight streamed through. The air smelled faintly of clay and glaze, earthy and honest. I still remember watching you when I was little, Claire said, her fingers trailing across the rim of a half-finished vase. I used to think you were a magician. Just a lump of mud, and then suddenly something beautiful. I handed her a small block of clay. It's not magic. It's patience. Pressure in the right places. Letting the wheel do its work while you guide it. She sat at the wheel, her hands clumsy at first, laughter bubbling as the clay wobbled. I stood behind her, steadying her wrist. Gentle but firm. Don't fight it. Shape it. The bowl she produced was uneven, fragile, but her pride lit the room. It's crooked, she admitted, grinning. It's yours, I said. That makes it perfect. Moments like that began to weave a fragile bridge between us. She still carried the habits of Margaret's world, the constant worry about appearances, the instinct to measure herself against others. But there was softness now, too, a willingness to listen, a hunger for something more real. One evening over chamomile tea, she confessed, "Sometimes I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. For so long, I tried to be the daughter Margaret wanted, the wife Ethan needed, the woman who fit in, and now with the baby coming, I'm scared." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. Fear is part of it, Claire, but so is strength. You'll find it, and you won't be alone. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, I told her softly. It's something you accept. I don't want to hold anger anymore, but I need you to respect me, to see me. I do now, she whispered. I really do. As weeks slipped into months, her belly grew round beneath her dresses, and her visits became routine. She asked about my classes, my exhibitions, even attended one, standing quietly at the back as strangers admired my work. When I caught her eye across the room, she smiled. Not the polished smile she used with Margaret's friends, but one that belonged to my daughter, the girl I remembered. Ethan came once too. He lingered near the doorway, shifting uncomfortably until Claire nudged him forward. I wanted to thank you, he said, for standing your ground. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Margaret has a way of consuming everything. I nodded. Boundaries are difficult, but they're necessary. His relief was almost palpable. Claire's stronger for it. We both are. Still, rebuilding wasn't easy. There were days Claire's words stung, small reminders of how deep Margaret's influence had gone. Once, while admiring a vase in my studio, she said, Margaret would love this color. The silence that followed made her wince. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Habit." I smiled gently. "Habits take time to break." She nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "But I want to." By autumn, the nursery was nearly complete. Claire invited me to see it. A soft room painted in pale yellow, shelves already filled with picture books, a rocking chair tucked into the corner. Margaret wanted to hire a designer, Claire admitted, brushing her hand across the crib's smooth edge. But Ethan and I did this ourselves. I wanted it to feel like home, not a magazine spread. "It's beautiful," I said. And it was. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. Walking back to my car that evening, I felt something stir inside me. Fragile, but steady. Reconnection wasn't instant. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was bowls crooked at the rim, tea shared in quiet kitchens, nurseries painted by hand. It was slow, deliberate, imperfect work, like shaping clay until it held. For years, I had believed I had lost my daughter to a world that saw me as small, unworthy. But now, piece by piece, I saw her reaching back, fumbling, sometimes faltering, but reaching still, and I at last was ready to meet her halfway. Winter settled over the city with its long nights and muted skies. Yet inside my home, there was warmth I hadn't felt in years. Claire visited often now, sometimes alone, sometimes with Ethan, who grew less guarded with each encounter. The tension that had once filled every word between us began to ease, replaced by something more fragile, more honest. One afternoon, as snow feathered against the windows, Claire sat curled on my sectional sofa, her hands resting on her round belly. She watched me shape clay on the wheel, the soft hum filling the quiet room. "What are you making?" she asked. "A vessel," I said, my hands steady as the clay widened beneath my touch. "For your child, something sturdy, simple, a place for treasures or secrets or dreams." Her eyes softened. "You're making a gift for the baby?" "I am." I guided the rim gently, coaxing it into balance. "But it's more than that. It's a promise, you." The silence stretched, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Claire shifted, her voice low. "I never told you how much I missed you this past year." I pretended I didn't, but every holiday, every quiet night, I felt the emptiness. I looked at her, my heart aching with both sorrow and relief. "I missed you too, but I needed that space. I had to find myself again." "And you did." She glanced around the room, her gaze resting on the shelves lined with bowls and vases, the photographs from Maine and the Grand Canyon, the soft colors I had chosen for these walls. "You're different." "I'm more me," I corrected gently. "That's the gift of it. I can be your mother without disappearing into it. I can love you and still love myself." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want to lose you again." "You won't," I said. "But you'll never see me behind a curtain again either. If I'm in your life, it will be as all of me, visible, respected, loved for who I am, not hidden for who I'm not." She nodded, wiping her tears. "That's what I want too. For my child to grow up knowing their grandmother as she really is. Strong, creative, unapologetic." The wheel slowed beneath my fingers, the vessel complete. I lifted it carefully, the clay cool and damp, the form steady. For years, my hands had been tools of sacrifice, shaping Claire's world, holding her needs above my own. Now they shaped something different, a future built on truth instead of pretense. In the weeks that followed, we spent hours together, talking, laughing, sometimes falling quiet, but always returning to each other. She asked me to teach her more pottery techniques, and together we built small, imperfect bowls that cluttered the shelves. We planned baby showers not at country clubs, but in warm, welcoming rooms. Ethan, once cautious, began to smile with ease in my presence, speaking openly of his own frustrations with Margaret and his relief at finally setting boundaries. Margaret's shadow didn't disappear overnight. She still sent messages sharp as thorns, insisting her vision of how things should be. But Claire had changed. She no longer bent beneath Margaret's weight. She deleted the texts, rolled her eyes, and turned instead to me and Ethan. For the first time, I saw my daughter not as a child I had to protect, but as a woman learning to stand her ground. And in that recognition, our relationship shifted into something new, something that felt like respect flowing both ways. The night Claire went into labor, she called me first. "Mom, it's time," she said, her voice breaking with both fear and excitement. Hours later, I held my grandchild in my arms, a tiny, fragile being swaddled in soft cotton, their breath warm against my skin. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered promises into the small ear pressed against my chest. Promises of love without conditions, of presence without shame, of a grandmother who would never again be invisible. Claire watched me, her face pale from exhaustion but glowing with something deeper. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for everything, for finally teaching me what real love looks like." And in that hospital room, with life beginning anew in my arms, I realized what my journey had been leading to all along. Not escape, not revenge, but the reclamation of self. By choosing myself, I had given Claire and her child the greatest gift I could. An example of a woman who knew her worth, who stood tall even when it hurt, who loved without erasing herself. The vessel dried slowly in my studio, ready to hold treasures yet to come. And I knew, as surely as I knew the beating of my own heart, that this time the legacy I was passing on would not be sacrifice in silence. It would be authenticity. It would be love that required no hiding. If you've walked beside me through this journey, don't stop here. Share this story. Let it ripple outward so that others who feel unseen might find the courage to step into their light. Real love doesn't demand invisibility. It sees, it values, it allows us to grow.